Welcome to the Careers by Jenn podcast, episode 224. Today on the podcast, Jenn engages the subject of how to know whether a job interview went well. Like when they don't make eye contact at the end of the interview and say, "Don't call us, we'll call you." That's good, right?
You're listening to the Careers by Jenn podcast with me, Jenn Swanson, the podcast that helps you to get the job, love your work, and advance your career. You've had your job interview, you're leaving the location where it took place, and you just don't know. You probably know it didn't go terribly, but you'd like some kind of idea as to whether or not it was passable or good or even great. Let's look at 9 of the ways to tell that it went well right after this.
Are you procrastinating? Do you want to start a job search but aren't quite sure where to begin? Is it all just a little overwhelming? At Careers by Jenn, we have a 5-day Jumpstart Your Job Search Challenge to help you get unstuck and move toward finding your dream job. Every day for 5 days, you'll receive an email to your inbox that asks you to complete one task. Every task you complete moves you closer toward your goal. The best part about this challenge is that it's absolutely free. Come over to careersbyjenn.com and you'll see the 5-day Jumpstart Your Job Search Challenge on the right-hand side of the screen. Click on the image of Jenn, sign up with your email address, and you'll be 5 days closer to reaching your goal. Why wait when you can get busy? Visit careersbyjenn.com after this podcast.
The obvious first thing is if you were offered the job by the time you get home, then of course it went beautifully. That would be clear. But one of the questions I get asked often, especially when people have to wait sometimes for weeks to hear back, is how do I know that it went well? How can I know that I did a good job? Well, the truth is you can't absolutely know 100% because what happens in the hiring process can be very subjective. You might not know that a particular person has been groomed for that role for months and that the whole posting interview process was done as a formality because it had to be done. But it was just an exercise in ticking boxes, and in the end, no one else was ever going to be hired. This happens a lot. You can't know either how anyone else's interview went, or how the other candidates may have connected well with the interviewer, or the interview team, or what common shared connections or experiences exist. There's an awful lot that you will not ever be able to know. However, if you are out there job seeking and you want to improve your chances of acing the next interview, knowing that you did well on the last one, or knowing that you didn't do well on the last one would be really helpful so that you could learn. It would be extremely helpful in your progression and in your growth as a job seeker. So today I'm going to share with you 9 ways to tell that your interview went well. And so that if you've hit all of these or most of them, you can rest assured that whatever else happens, there was nothing more you could have done. And for some people, this is a relief. It's comforting, at least to know that you did your absolute best. You can only control the things that you can control, right? And what other people do is not up to you. So before I begin, I just wanted to say I know that it's been a while since I've put out a show, and I believe I mentioned a few episodes back that I'm not going to be publishing every single week anymore, mostly because life is just too busy. And I'm doing many, many things. I've got lots of projects on the go, and I just can't get to this labor of love as often as I had in the past. So I do plan to publish at least twice a month, and maybe more, but that's why you'll notice that some weeks there isn't a new episode. We have over 220, we're up to episode 224, back episodes now, so there should be lots of content for you to enjoy if you've missed some of them. And otherwise, please know that I'm still here, that we're still doing the show. We're just not doing it every single week, all of the time. All right, so let's get into our topic today, and let's share the 9 ways that you can know that your interview went well. So the first one is that the interview runs longer than expected. If you expected the interview to take 30 or 45 minutes and it runs over an hour or even longer, you know things are going well. Maybe there's real conversation happening. Hopefully there is rapport. There are good questions for you to answer, and the interviewer or the hiring team are genuinely interested in your responses. If the conversation turns casual, that's a real sign in the right direction. When you end up just chit-chatting and starting to build relationship, all of this can indicate that it was a great interview. So if you run longer than expected, that's a very, very good sign. The second thing is that contact information is exchanged. Now, hopefully, your contact information was very clearly listed on your resume, and that the interviewer doesn't have to ask you how to reach you, but they might ask you what the best number is to call you at. And if they hand you their card or their personal phone line or private email or something like that, then you know that that's a good thing. If they offer you this and say, if you have any other comments or questions, just reach out, that indicates further contact is quite likely, and that indicates a level of interest and trust. So if they give you their contact information, then that's a very good sign. The third thing is that you are asked when you would be available to start. If they're asking about your availability, about maybe they're going to ask you about how much notice you need to give your current employer, or they ask what date you would be available to start, or they ask if you have any pre-booked commitments that might interfere with work, then this is a very good sign. They're already starting to plan your start date and when you could be onboarded and all the rest of it. So these are very, very good questions. If you are asked when you would be available to start, that's a good sign. The fourth thing is if salary is discussed. Now, salary is often an awkward subject, and if the interviewer is not interested in you, they're not even going to get to that topic. But if they ask you about your current salary, or they ask about what your expectations are regarding salary in this potential role, it could indicate that the interviewer is serious about making you an offer. So a salary conversation in any way is a very good sign. And again, they're not going to get into that if you're not going to get past round one. The fifth item, I can tell this is going to be a short episode, but that's okay. The fifth item is when specific job responsibilities are discussed. So if you start hearing all the nitty-gritty, the details about what the job entails, especially if they use the word you, as in, well, you would be responsible for X. Well, that's a very good sign because they're imagining you in the role. So pay attention to the language that the interviewer uses. It means they can already see you doing that. And most interviewers won't bother getting into the fine details with someone that they are not interested in. So if they start telling you what a day in the life looks like, if they start detailing, well, we have a conference that we're doing in November, so you would be responsible for planning that, etc. If they start telling you about all of the different travel that you'll have to do, or what clothing you'll need to wear, etc., then they're getting into the details. And if they get down into the details, then that's a very good indication. And so that was number 5. Number 6 is if you notice they are pitching you, they're giving you the sales pitch. In other words, the interviewer seems to be trying to sell you on the job, talking it up, talking about what an amazing company it is to work for, talking about how other employees are happy and all the benefits they get, etc., etc. There would be no sales pitch needed if they weren't interested in you. So if you notice a sales pitch happening, then pay attention to that because that's a good sign. Number 7 is if you are introduced to the rest of the team. Being introduced to other staff and other team members is a very good indication, because there would be no point in doing that if you weren't a clear prospect. So if they walk you around and introduce you to others, if they give you a tour of the space, if others are brought into the room later in your interview to meet you, then you know things have gone well. If they start walking you around and saying this is where your desk would be, and this is where, or this is where you would be working, or this is what it looks like in here, if they take all of that time to do that, then you know that's a good sign that you are in the running. So that is number 7. Another thing I want to sneak in here that I didn't number, that isn't part of this, is body language. Pay attention to their body language. If it's open, if they're leaning forward, if they're smiling a lot and nodding with your answers, if they seem engaged in what you're saying, then that can be a good indication too. It's not always 100%, of course, but pay attention to the body language, because if they're not interested, you're going to know. You're going to know from the body language where it's more closed, where they're not leaning forward, they're not looking you in the eye, they're not engaged. So pay attention to that as well. That was 7.5. Number 8, you are asked if you have other job prospects. If you are actively in a job search, if you are searching for work and you've applied for and maybe even been interviewed elsewhere, that would only be of interest to an interviewer if they were thinking about offering you the job. If they know that you've got other irons in the fire, as it were, they might move a little faster, or they might risk losing you to some other job offer. So this question could be an indication of their interest. If they ask you, have you had other interviews? Do you have other job offers? What's happening in your job search? Because if they are worried about you taking a job elsewhere, they might indicate that. So that's an important thing if they ask you about other possibilities. And the last one is if you are given clear and detailed next steps. The hiring process can take weeks and weeks, and in some cases months to complete. Now, in other cases, it can be instant. They've been looking for a long time. Here you are. They want you. Here's, you might get a phone call before you even get home, or an email or something. But it might take weeks and months depending on the size of the organization and how many people they have to interview, etc., etc. If you are offered a detailed explanation of what happens next, so for example, next we're going to do reference checks and there might be a second interview, there will be some testing, whatever that happens to be, then there's a good possibility that you will end up making it to round 2, whatever round 2 happens to be, that you'll end up farther along the process with this job quest in the near future. Having the interviewer explain in detail what the next steps will be is a good sign that the interview has gone well, because they may not explain all of that in great detail to someone they're not going to bother with. That person may end up with an email that says, "Thank you for your time. We've gone in another direction." But it's good to know. What I don't like, and I think is rude, but it happens, are organizations that string people along, especially people who are actively in a job search, are really hoping for that particular job, maybe have been offered other jobs, but are waiting to say yes or no to those until they hear back from this other one. And they don't hear, and they don't hear, and they don't hear, and finally they're disappointed when the people say we're not interested. Like, why couldn't they have done that earlier in the process, right? So I find that really rude, disrespectful, and frustrating for the job seeker, because you don't want to be strung along. You don't want to wait for months, and you don't want to have your life on hold hoping if there isn't any hope. So that is a difficult situation to be in. It happens to people. And if you're in a hurry or you need work, then that can be exceedingly frustrating. You also don't want to settle, if possible. You don't want to have to settle. So that is something I empathize with. And so hopefully if you have any questions about that, and you can say to the interviewer, I'm interviewing at 3 other places this week. I'd really appreciate if I'm in the running to know that, so that I don't take any offers. I mean, you can say that if you're comfortable saying that. But it's okay to let them know that you've got other prospects and you've got other things going on. Because if they really do want you, then they're going to speed it up a little bit and let you know, so that you don't accept something else and they lose the chance to have you. All right, so these 9.5 indications are not a guarantee, of course. As I said before, you could have aced that interview and have been a most excellent candidate, and for whatever reason still not get offered the job in the end. Sometimes the interview process is a formality, as I said before. Sometimes seniority comes into play, or there's a union and there's a certain progression involved. Maybe there are 2 or 3 excellent candidates, and maybe it's a really difficult choice for the interview team or the hiring team to make. Maybe it's a real struggle for them to decide who is going to be the correct choice. And so they really have to spend some time thinking and discerning and discussing. And it could be that you were excellent, but somebody else was just a teeny bit more excellent, right? Sometimes it's cultural fit. Sometimes it's qualifications or experience. Sometimes it's just rapport, how you got along with the people that you were talking with. And sometimes it's that they are seeking someone very different than the person who was in the role before, someone with different gifts, with a fresh perspective, and maybe that's not you. The opposite is true. Maybe you are so different than the person that was in the role before that you're perceived to be a little bit too risky. That happened to me once. I had applied for a job, and the person that had been there before had retired and had been there for years and years and years. And I was coming in brand new, and I think I was too brand new. They wanted somebody who had been there, done that, and who was going to be very similar to the person who had been there before. And I even asked the question at the end of the interview. I said, "What are you looking for?" And they basically said the name of the person who had just retired, which, was a man, for one thing, and much older, and actually completely different than I was. And so I didn't get that job. I was disappointed because I thought it had gone well. In the end, they hired someone else who was close to retirement age and was similar in personality and everything than the person, of course not the same, but similar to the person who had just retired. So, you don't know what's in the head of the interviewer or the hiring team. And it may just be that it has nothing to do with anything you can control. There are dozens of reasons why, despite your absolute best efforts, you might not be the successful candidate. So my advice is to not beat yourself up about it. Do your absolute best, which means being very well prepared. And that is all you can do. I also suggest you don't put all your hope and energy into one application, but you continue to pursue work relentlessly until you are offered something, and something that you actually want to take. Please don't settle unless you absolutely have to. But keep at it, keep going. And hopefully that will help. If you'd like help getting interview ready, come on over to careersbyjen.com, click on the Work With Me tab at the top, and then click on the online courses. And you'll see my interview skills course called How to Ace Your Next Job Interview. And the subtitle is When You Haven't Interviewed in a Long Time. Even if you have, there might be things you could learn in this course. It's a comprehensive online self-paced video course. It's packed with tips and information that will prepare you for whatever kind of interview that you might be heading into. And my favorite responses from people who have completed the course are always the ones that say, "Jen, I got the job." So take a look at the reviews on the course as well, because I've helped lots of people get work. And it's all there for you. And if you do the work and do the exercise and go through the course, then you'll be fully prepared to walk into that interview and do your best and ace it. So thanks for listening today. I wish you all the very best in your job search. And I do want to hear if you've taken this advice, and I want to hear how it's helped you, if it has, in your job search and in being successful in getting a job. You've been listening to Careers by Jenn with Jenn Swanson. If you like what you heard, please share this. You know, if every single person listening today shared this episode with just one friend, our audience would be twice as big just like that. And the more people we can help with our content, the better. So help out a friend and help grow our audience by sharing this show with someone you know who would benefit from the content. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that, and together we can make a difference. Until next time, take good care.